Hi there, welcome to Yoga for Tennis. My name is Margaret Bannon. I'm here at Play Tennis Practice Yoga, and today we're going to do a short sequence for the quadriceps. So this is for all of you tennis players wanting to strengthen and perhaps lengthen the fronts of the thighs. As we know, the quadriceps are super important because they allow us to extend the legs. Our legs are our base in tennis. They allow us to take explosive movements, and they allow us to change directions for the ball, which happens many times over the course of the point. And so if we have a nice solid base in our legs, we're able to use the kinetic chain a little more efficiently. All right, so we're going to start off with a sequence today. All you need is a blanket. That's what I'm seated on. If you have a yoga block, that would be helpful. Otherwise, you could use your blanket and substitute for this. And then I'll also be using a chair and a wall. So I'm using the tennis fence today. So you might scope those things out. You might also look through the practice once before you do it if you're not sure what you're in for. And we're going to start off with a little centering practice. We'll also end with a brief relaxation. You might be tempted to skip those portions, but these portions are very important to the rest of the practice as they help set things up and they help slow things down or ease a transition as you go back into what you were doing before you came into the practice. All right, so if you like this practice, I would love for you to subscribe to our channel. We have practices both on the court where we're hitting balls and on the mat. All right, so let's come onto our back for our brief centering practice just to set things up. So as I come onto my back, I'm just gonna bend my knees. I'm gonna slowly let myself down. And in these first few moments, I just want you to feel your body heavy on the mat. And you're noticing where your body meets the ground. Observing if there are any parts of you that are resisting away from the ground. Can you give in for a moment? And then might you become a little more aware of the fronts of the thighs for today's practice. The quadriceps, the quads. Become aware of that part of the body. And also become aware of your breath without changing a thing. Just notice what your breath feels like today. We'll be using the breath as a way to make the mind-body connection, as we can also do on court. We'll talk a little more about that in future practices. So take about 3 more breaths, allowing it to feel comfortable, smooth. We never want our yoga to become an additional stress in our life. We have enough of those. And as we start to move into the more active portion of our practice, see that your feet are about hips width apart and see that the heels are about 4 or 5 inches away from the hips. And I'll bring my arms along the sides of the body, palms down. So you're grounding through feet, through upper arms, through the back of the head. And as you press into the feet, I'd like you to lift your hips up and away from the mat. We call this the bridge pose. And as you exhale, lower the hips down. So it's an inhale, lift the hips up, just starting to become aware of your legs a little bit more. Exhale, lower the hips down. We're going to shoot for 3 more times on your breath rather than my call now. Maybe you hold the last one for a breath or two, really grounding into the feet, feeling the strength of your legs. And then go ahead and lower the hips down. So I mentioned that the quadriceps straighten the legs. So think about all those times you're in the ready position and then you have to spring into action. So we'll work with that straight leg position right now. So go ahead and reach your right leg up towards the sky or towards the ceiling and find the leg the angle rather, at which your leg can become straight. So I'm a little tighter in nature. I have to angle my leg a little more forward. I'm going to flex my foot so that the toes draw in towards the shin, and I should start to feel as if the front of the thigh becomes a little more firm. Now let's go ahead and inhale and lower the leg down. See if you can feel the point at which your heel is just above the ground, and as you exhale, lift the leg up. Inhale, lower the leg down. You're trying to do this with control. Exhale, come on up. Again, we'll do that about 3 more times. So we're being conservative in our reps today, just to give you a taste for the strength that might be acquired in the legs. Of course, you could do this for longer periods of time. Reps of 10, 12, 15. You could even repeat that. And then you'll allow the knee to bend, the foot will come to the mat. You'll take a resting breath in between the sides. Now let's go ahead and extend that left leg up. So again, it might be different on this side. Find the angle at which the leg can become straight. Flex the foot, really firm up the front of the thigh. And now we'll inhale and lower the leg down. See if you can tell where your body is in space. Exhale, come on up. Inhale, lower the leg down. And if you wanted to make this more challenging, you could also straighten the bottom leg, allowing it to come all the way down to the ground. So that might be something that you might experiment with in your home practice or as I speak. I believe we have 2 more to go here. And then bend the knee, let the foot come to the ground. Let's hug the knees in towards the chest for a moment just to balance out the sides. Already you might have gotten a sense for, is one side a little stronger than the other? We can often feel these differences as we become a little more aware in our yoga practice. So now let's go ahead and lower the feet down. Let's reach one arm up overhead and let's roll over onto our side. Support the head for a moment and then use the strength of your arms to press yourself up. This might be where you use the support of a blanket underneath the knees for a little padding, especially if where you're working is a little harder. So I'm going to take my blanket about halfway down my mat and I'm going to pad the knees and the shins. So from here, if it's comfortable, I'm going to go ahead and sink my hips back towards my heels. If we have limitations in the knees, even in the lower back, a modification for this would be to curl the toes under. So let's show that now. So either way, the hips sink back towards the heels to comfort, and then we stretch the arms forward. I'm going to spread my fingers nice and wide. Initially, you might feel a stretch through the back side of the body, but we're also hoping to bring some awareness into the arms to help us with this transition of downward facing dog. Rooting down through the hands, slowly come to the hands and knees. Inhale, and as you exhale, curl the toes under. Lift your bent knees off the mat. Now see if you can keep your knees bent here initially as you press the belly and the chest towards the tops of the thighs. Can you elongate through the spine? Now, let's work towards straightening those legs a little bit more. So you might start to bicycle the heels towards the ground a little bit. One knee bends as the opposite leg straightens. Most likely you'll become aware of your hamstrings, the backs of the legs as well. The opposing muscles on the backs of the legs. And now see if it's possible to begin to straighten the legs a little bit more without losing the length in your spine. In fact, on purpose, see if you can firm up the fronts of the thighs. Lead with your legs as you reach the hips up and back, downward facing dog. So for more instruction on this pose, I do have a video explaining this pose a little more in depth. And now let's baby step our feet forward towards our hands. Maybe walk your hands towards your feet, especially if you're a little tighter through the backs of the legs. Can you feel grounded through the feet? So we talked about the kinetic chain earlier. So this is similar in yoga. We start from the ground up. Feel your feet. Start to feel the firmness of your thighs. even though you might become aware of other sensations through the back body. Maybe you're aware of your breath, even holding the breath, which is common in this transition. And now press into your feet. Use the strength of your legs to slowly rise up as you lead with the chest. Feel the legs straightening a little bit more as we come to stand into what we generally call mountain pose, where we root through the feet, we straighten and strengthen the legs. Maybe we draw up on the kneecaps a bit. And from that strength in the legs, we come to stand up a little bit taller. Bring your palms together in front of the heart. Let's take a couple of breaths, just getting used to our base standing posture, mountain pose. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and move my blanket off to the side. We'll use this a little bit later. And this is where I'm going to come to stand in front of my chair. We're not initially going to use the chair, but we're going to lead up towards that. So I'm standing in front of my chair so that the chair seat is sort of meeting the backs of my calves, the backs of my knees, and I'm back into that mountain posture stance where my feet are about hips width apart. So this is going to mimic chair pose in yoga, also called powerful pose, but we're going to get a taste for it before we take this a little bit deeper. So what I'd like you to do is inhale, reach your arms out in front of you. As you exhale, bend your knees. This may be about 20 degrees or so. Maybe your ankles limit your movement. And as you inhale, stand up, exhale, lower the arms. So we're essentially warming up the legs for where we're going next. Inhale, exhale, bend the knees. Notice how the legs feel. Does this position look familiar? Should be pretty familiar to our ready position. As we sink down, think about that racket that we have in front of us. So it might be a nice idea to warm up this idea of being in the ready position before going on court. So we're going to do one more, moving on breath, vinyasa style. Dynamic movement so that we can take it deeper. But before we do, take a nice breath. And then I'd like you to come to sit in the chair. So if what we're doing next is challenging for the legs, could be even challenging for the knees. This is great in strengthening for the knees, actually. You could take your blanket and place that on top of your chair seat. That would make what we're doing a little bit easier, okay? So as you come to sit in the chair, I'm sitting so that my heels are generally beneath my knees. You might feel like your heels want to come in a little bit, but let the heels be beneath the knees. Now you were just working on sinking down into that chair pose, and now we're going to work on standing up. So you're going to begin to feel the strength required here within your thighs. So what I'd like you to do is inhale, reach the arms forward, and as you exhale, press into your feet, stand up, relax the arms, and now we'll go in reverse. Inhale, arms forward, exhale, bend the knees as you search for that chair seat with the backs of your hips. Inhale, arms up, exhale, stand up. Inhale, arms forward, exhale, sit down, and let's move on breath. We're going to do this 2 more times. We're really using the strength of the legs to stand up. Last time you end up standing, let's stay standing. Maybe adjust the feet if you didn't end up quite hips width apart. Take a couple of breaths here in your mountain pose. Maybe even observe if you've started to create a little heat in your body. What's happened with the breath? Can you use your breath to equalize? Any holding on of the breath? Maybe the breath became a bit more rapid. And so we did some dynamic movement, and now we'll do a hold to help a little bit more with endurance. Maybe you have a long match, right? You're having to hold that stance for long periods of time, not just in your ready position as you're waiting to return serve, as you're in that ready position all day long throughout that match. So let's move our chair off to the side mindfully. Actually, you might not have to with your wall. I'm just using this post right here. So if you're using a wall, that might not be the case for you. And so for today, because I'm using the tennis fence, I'm going to stand right up against the tennis fence or the wall. And so we're going to hold this a little bit longer, about 30 seconds period of time. For me, that's about 6 breaths, but you might use your little smartwatch or your phone, and this is something that you might do more reps of in your own practice as well. So we're going to slide down the wall. You have to be a little more careful with the tennis fence, so that when you bend the knees, again, the knees are over the heels, the knees are bent at about 90 degrees, and I've got my back up against that wall. I can relax my arms, or I might even bring my hands in front of me like I'm holding that ready position. Even go forward like this, and let's breathe as we hold. Try to look straight ahead. Focusing on the breath, and maybe focusing on something visually in front of you can take your mind off of what's challenging. We have to do this when we play tennis, right? We have to use our visual sense, our breath, to take our mind off of the stress of what may be happening in our match. And so you're probably starting to feel that right about now. And then I want you to use your hands against that wall or that fence to slowly lift yourself up. Okay, so I'm hoping that you felt a little something happening there within the thighs. I know I did. I'm starting to build even more heat. Okay, and so you might have done a lot of lunges in your previous practices as far as strength is positioned for the legs, and we're going to get to that, but because you've done all of this work, we're going to do a little bit of stretching first before we use a transition that might resemble some of these traditional lunges that you might have done on court. So again, you might use the wall or the fence, especially if your balance is not so great. So this might be either a little more of a balance, or it might be a little more of a quad stretch. So if you really need the stretch and the balance is off, you might hang on to a wall. Otherwise, find your mountain posture stance. So find your balance first. I want you to feel a little more weight on that left side. You might bring the hands to the hips as you bring your toes to the mat, as you bring your toes slightly back behind you. I'm going to bend my knee. I'm going to bring that heel in towards my back side. I'm going to take a hold of the foot or the ankle. You could also use a yoga strap if this were challenging for you to do. So I'm going to lengthen my kneecap down. I'm going to lengthen my tailbone down as I draw that heel in towards my back side. I might even allow my right elbow to bend a little bit more to deepen the stretch as I take some breaths. And then I'll slowly come on out. I'm going to take a resting breath in between. I'm going to feel more weight on this right side now as I come up onto left toes, as I bring those toes back behind me, and as I bend my knee and bring the heel in towards my back side. So again, I'm finding something to focus on. It helps tremendously. I'm finding my breath. And you'll start to notice all of your habits of that standing leg. Don't be too concerned if the balance doesn't feel too good. That just means that you're getting a lot out of this pose. Full breath. breaths to notice how this side compares to first side. And then I'll go ahead and let go of that foot. I'll make my way back to the mountain pose. I'll take 3 breaths this time, regrounding. And then I'm going to go ahead and find my blanket. This will be helpful because you're going to be coming down to one knee, and sometimes that knee can feel a little funky as you're balancing on it. So I'm going to bring that blanket about halfway down my mat. I'm going to stand in front of my blanket. Okay, I'm going to bring my hands to my hips for balance. Okay. Now think about what we did when we were sitting in the chair. We're going to do something similar. So to transition down, what I'd like you to do is bend your knees. You can even take a look back at that blanket. You're going to step over that blanket with your right foot. Notice I'm coming to the toes. So notice this lunge-like stance as you slowly lower down with control. So I'm bringing my right knee down to the ground, and then I go ahead and step my left leg back. So take a moment. So we step back with right. So now I want you to come forward with right. So I'm curling my back toes under. I want to lean forward. I can keep my hands on my hips. I can bring my hands on this front thigh. If you discover that this is challenging for you, you can use 2 yoga blocks at your side, even a chair in front. So we're going to go ahead and lean forward. See if you can step over that blanket, make your way back to mountain pose. Take a breath. And now let's see how second side compares. Again, you might take a little peek back at the blanket. You're going to take a nice long step back with left leg, and the toes meet the ground as you bend the knee. And then we'll bring the right leg back. And now left leg comes forward. I'm going to curl those back toes under. I'm going to lean forward. I'm going to step over the blanket. Take a breath. And then we have to make our way back down to the ground. So I want you to pick the side that might have felt a little bit weaker. So for me, it's my left side. So I'm going to bend my knees. Okay, I'm going to sink my hips back. I'm going to step back with the weaker side as I come down. And now I've made it down to the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and shift my hips over to one side as I bring my legs out in front of me, and as I move my blanket off to the side, and as I scooch forward so that I have at least half of my mat behind me. Now, if you're not working with the yoga block, you might use this blanket as you see mine folded so that you have a little bit of a lift for beneath the hips. You'll see what I mean. So I'm going to have my block or my folded blanket handy. And I'm going to slowly come down with knees bent, little by little. I'm going to feel myself on my mat again. Might feel good. Might take a nice breath here just to let it all go again. And so we'll come full circle. We did some dynamic bridging at the beginning of the practice. Now we're going to do a passive bridge or a restorative version of the bridge pose. So again, my feet are about hips width apart. My heels are about 4 or 5 inches away from the hips. I'm going to press into my feet. I'm going to lift up. Now I'm going to take my block. And if you're not working with the block, you'll work with that folded yoga blanket. And notice how I'm bringing the block beneath my sacrum. That's the area above my tailbone. Should feel like 2 flat surfaces are pressing in towards one another. As I relax my arms open, as I feel my feet on the mat, and as I allow there to be a heaviness in the hips. I'm going to take about 10 breaths here. In other words, this is the reward for all of the hard work. Once you think you've taken your 10 breaths, you'll lift up and away from the support. You'll move that off to the side, and just to release out the hips a bit, the lower back. You might open those arms out to your side for a moment, bring the feet wide on the mat, and just take a couple of gentle windshield wiper-like twisting actions side to side. So just massage the low back. Let it feel good. And then from here, we're going to come into a very brief relaxation. So if you discover that you do like the relaxation, I have a longer relaxation practice that you might do that all on its own after practice one day. And so I'll extend my legs. I'll let my feet be a little wider than the hips. So if you do this and you discover that it doesn't feel like the low back can relax completely, you feel an overarching in the lower back, know that you can roll up your blanket and place that beneath the knees. So I'll let my feet be a little wider than the hips. My arms are a couple inches away from the sides of the body. My head rests at center, and I'm going to come to close the eyes now. And your only job here is to be with the sensations in your body. See if you can be with them without judging. Notice if your mind wants to go back to what we've done in the practice or something previous to that. Can you be here right now? Give into all of that support beneath you. Maybe scan the body and observe where might you invite yourself to let go a little bit more. As you now observe your breath without any control. And so we'll be here for about a minute or so. See if you can train yourself to come back to where you are, sensations in the body, feeling the breath, training yourself to become a little more present. This is super helpful in your tennis matches and your tennis practice so that we can get more out of what we're working towards. The last few moments to feel the body, the mind in a deep and complete sense of relaxation. Go ahead and invite movement back into the body, wiggling fingers and toes, bending the knees, and eventually rolling over onto your side and slowly pressing yourself up. So take one last moment to sit well. So you might sit on that blanket, you might sit on that yoga block. A moment to feel the weight of your sit bones. That's a nice reminder that you're still here, you're still in your practice. As you feel the weight of your hips, the weight of your legs, your base, as we discussed earlier. From that base, feel a nice lift and lengthening through the spine. Bring your palms together in front of your heart. Let's take 3 more complete breaths here together. Take a moment to be grateful for your desire, your willingness to be here and to practice yoga, to do something that's not only great for your game, but something that's great for you and self-care. And I thank you so much for joining me here at Play Tennis Practice Yoga. I would love to have you subscribe to our channel and check out our other practices. If you're into working the legs, I have a nice practice also for the hamstrings on the opposing side of what we worked today. And we have some of those other postures a little more in depth, like the bridge pose and like the downward facing dog that you might work on to learn a little more specifically. But we also have great practices on court. So please join us. Please check out our channel. I release a video at least every Tuesday for Yoga for Tennis Tuesdays. Thanks for being here, and I look forward to practicing with you soon. Namaste.